My parents secretly sold their home to fund my sister's six-figure engagement party, leaving them homeless with zero savings. They assumed they could move into my house rent-free indefinitely. I refused, so they tried to force their way in. I called the police and changed everything. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The silence in my living room was usually my favorite sound in the world. It was a heavy, expensive silence, the kind you pay a mortgage for. I was sitting on the floor, surrounded by the organized chaos of tax season documents, a glass of lukewarm water beside me, and the soft hum of the refrigerator the only disruption. It was 8:45 p.m. on a Tuesday. I was tired, my eyes were dry from staring at spreadsheets all day at the logistics firm, but I was peaceful. Then my phone buzzed against the hardwood floor. The vibration rattled through the boards, a harsh, invasive noise that made me jump. I looked down. The screen lit up with a photo I hadn't changed in years, Mom and Dad. I didn't want to answer. A knot, tight and familiar, formed instantly in my stomach. We hadn't spoken in 3 weeks, not since I declined an invitation to a family strategy dinner that I knew was just code for Leela needs something and we need your checkbook. But guilt is a reflex I had been trained in since birth, so I picked it up. "Hello," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Claire," my mother Brenda didn't say hello. Her voice was pitched high, vibrating with that frantic, manic energy she always confused for excitement. "Are you home? Please tell me you're home. We're in the car." I frowned, instinctively glancing at the front door. "Yes, I'm home. Why? What's going on? Is Dad okay?" "Dad is fine. Gary is driving," she said dismissively. I heard the muffled sound of a turn signal in the background. "We're about 10 minutes away. We have good news. Or, well, big news, efficient news." "Efficient news," I repeated. "Mom, it's almost 9 o'clock at night. What are you talking about?" "We sold the house, Claire." The words didn't compute at first. My parents had lived in that 4-bedroom colonial since before I was born. It was their identity. It was where Brenda held her bridge club meetings to show off her crystal collection. It was where Gary hid in the garage to avoid Brenda's bridge club meetings. "You sold the house?" I asked, sitting up straighter. "When? You never mentioned you were listing it." "We didn't list it publicly, darling. A cash buyer, a developer. He made an offer last week and we closed this morning." Rapid fire. "Boom, done," she said, snapping her fingers near the receiver. "Okay," I said slowly, my mind racing. "That's sudden, but congratulations. Where are you moving? Did you buy a condo? I know you talked about downsizing to Florida eventually." There was a pause on the other end. A thick, loaded silence that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "Well, that's the thing," Brenda said, her voice dropping to that sugary, manipulative tone she used when she was asking for a favor she felt entitled to. "We didn't buy anything yet. The market is terrible, Claire, just awful, and we have expenses, big expenses coming up." "What expenses?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. The name was already forming on my lips. "Leela's engagement, obviously," she huffed as if I were being dense. "Do you know how much a venue costs these days? She wants the botanical gardens, Claire, the grand pavilion. And the catering? Well, we couldn't let her down. She's only getting married once, hopefully. We had to free up the equity." My blood ran cold. "You sold your house to pay for a party." "It's not just a party, it's a societal debut," she snapped. "Anyway, we have to be out of the house by midnight tonight. The developer wants the keys. The movers already took the storage unit stuff." "Midnight?" I looked at the clock. "Mom, that's in 3 hours. Where are you sleeping?" "Well," she laughed, a nervous, tinkling sound. "We're 10 minutes away, Claire. We're coming to you. We figured we'd take the guest suite, just until we sort things out, or until the wedding is over. It's better this way, really. We can be closer to you." They weren't asking. They had sold their roof, liquidated their assets for a party, and were currently driving toward my sanctuary with a car full of suitcases, assuming my door was unlocked for them. "No," I whispered. "What?" "No," I said louder this time, standing up. "Mom, you cannot live here." "Don't be dramatic, Claire. We're family. Turn the porch light on. Gary can't see well at night." "I am not turning the light on," I said, my voice shaking. "You sold your house without a plan. You can't just move in here. I work fro. Am home. I have a life. You can't just." "We are your parents," she screamed, the sweetness vanishing instantly. "We raised you. We sacrificed for you. And now, when we need a simple favor, you're going to leave us on the street? Would you prefer we sleep in the Honda?" "You have the money from the house sale," I countered. "Go to a hotel." "That money is allocated," she shrieked. "Every penny is budgeted for the wedding planner and the deposit. We can't touch it on hotels. We're coming over, Claire. Open the door, or I swear to God, I will make a scene that your neighbors will never forget." She hung up. I stood there in the silence, phone in hand, staring at the front door. I felt physically ill, a wave of nausea rolling over me. It wasn't just the imposition. It was the complete lack of respect, the assumption that I was merely a resource to be harvested when their poor planning required a safety net. The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis itself. I dropped the phone onto the couch. It bounced harmlessly against the cushions, but the impact felt heavy, final. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic rhythm that made it hard to breathe. I walked to the window, peering through the blinds at the empty street. The streetlights cast long, amber shadows across the pavement. It was quiet, peaceful, but I knew that in less than 10 minutes, that peace would be shattered by a silver Honda Accord and the whirlwind of entitlement that was my mother. I paced the length of my living room. Think, Claire, think. I am a senior operations manager for a global logistics firm. My entire life is built on risk assessment, contingency planning, and resource management. If a shipping container falls off a boat in the Pacific, I have a plan. If a warehouse in Ohio loses power, I have a backup generator protocol. My life is orderly because I make it that way. I bought this house, my house, 3 years ago. It's a modest, 2-story Craftsman with a wraparound porch. It's not a mansion, but it's mine. I paid the down payment with bonuses I earned by working 80-hour weeks while Leela was partying in Europe on gap years that Mom and Dad funded. The guest suite they mentioned, it's my home office. It has a pull-out couch, yes, but it's where I run my regional meetings. It's where my servers are. It's where I keep my files. I went to the kitchen and gripped the edge of the granite countertop, the cold stone grounding me. They sold their house, the house I grew up in, the house they had paid off 10 years ago. They had zero mortgage. They were sitting on a gold mine of equity, a retirement fund that should have kept them comfortable for the rest of their lives. And they liquidated it. For a wedding, for a party. Leela was 26. She had been engaged for 2 months to a man she met at a spin class. He was nice enough, I supposed, but he didn't have a job. He was an aspiring DJ. And my parents had just nuked their financial future to throw them a gala at the Botanical Gardens. The nausea returned. It was a physical rejection of their reality. I heard the rumble of an engine outside. I froze. Headlights swept across my living room wall, slicing through the blinds. They were here. I didn't move to the door. Instead, I retreated to the hallway, out of sight of the windows. I heard 2 car doors slam. Then the trunk popped. They were unloading. They weren't even coming to the door to ask. They were unloading luggage first. That presumption, that absolute certainty that I would fold, made anger flare up in my chest, burning away some of the panic. The doorbell rang, once, twice, then a heavy, rapid-fire knocking. "Claire, open up, it's freezing out here." Brenda's voice was muffled through the wood, but piercing nonetheless. I stayed silent. "Gary, call her again," I heard Brenda snap. "She's probably in the bathroom, Bren. Give her a minute," my father's voice mumbled. Gary was a softly spoken man, a man who had long ago decided that the path of least resistance was to simply agree with whatever insanity Brenda proposed. He was an enabler of the highest order. He would watch a building burn down if Brenda told him it was just a bonfire. "I don't have a minute, my coat is thin," Brenda yelled. She pounded on the door again. "Claire, I know you're in there, I can see the TV light." I wasn't watching TV. It was the standby light on the cable box. I took a deep breath. I wasn't going to let them in. If I opened that door, if I let them cross the threshold with a single suitcase, I would never get them out. In my state, tenancy laws were tricky. If they established residency, received mail, stayed for a certain number of days, I would have to legally evict them. I knew this because I had looked it up 6 months ago when Leela hinted about needing a place to crash. I walked to the security panel on the wall near the kitchen. I had installed it last year, a top-of-the-line system with cameras covering very exterior angle and audio recording in the main living areas. I tapped the screen. The feed from the front porch camera popped up in high definition. There they were. Brenda was wearing a faux fur coat that looked ridiculous in October, clutching a Louis Vuitton bag that I knew for a fact was a knockoff she bought in Chinatown. Gary was standing behind her, looking defeated, holding 2 massive suitcases and a garment bag. They looked like refugees from a high society disaster. "Claire!" Brenda screamed at the doorbell camera. She leaned in close, her face distorting in the fisheye lens. "I know you're watching this. Open this door right now. This is cruel. This is elder abuse." Elder abuse. They were 58 and 60. They were younger than the president. I pressed the intercom button. My voice would project out to the porch, crisp and clear. "Go to a hotel, Mom," I said. "I am not opening the door." On the screen, Brenda jumped. She looked around, trying to find where the voice came from before glaring at the camera lens. "We don't have money for a hotel," she hissed. "We told you, the money is for Leela." "Then ask Leela for a place to stay," I said calmly, though my hand was shaking against the wall. "Leela lives in a studio apartment with Chad," Brenda yelled. "There's no room. You have a 4-bedroom house all to yourself. You're selfish, Claire. You've always been selfish. Hoarding your money, hoarding your space. We are your family." "I am not letting you in," I repeated. "Leave, or I'm calling the police for trespassing." Gary looked up at the camera, his eyes wide. "Claire, bear, please, just for tonight, we're tired." "No, Dad," I said, my voice cracking slightly. "Because it won't be just for tonight. You sold your house. You have nowhere to go. If I let you in, you live here, and I cannot live with you." "We sold the house for your sister's happiness," Brenda screamed, banging her fist on the door. "Something you wouldn't understand because you're too busy with your spreadsheets to find a man." The insult landed, but it was a dull ache, an old wound. They thought I was a cold, unfeeling robot. They thought I was just a bank account with a heartbeat. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. I treat my life like a contract, and they were in breach. To understand why I couldn't open that door, you have to understand the economy of my family. I was the investment, Leela was the product. I was born 6 years before Leela. My childhood was standard, if a bit transaction-based. If I got straight A's, I got dinner at a restaurant. If I did my chores, I got allowance. But when Leela was born, the currency changed. Leela was beautiful, angelic, really. Blonde curls, blue eyes, a smile that could melt glaciers. My parents, specifically Brenda, became intoxicated by her. By the time I was 16, I was working 2 part-time jobs, one at a library, one tutoring math, to save for a car because my parents told me they couldn't afford to help me. "Money is tight, Claire," Gary had said, looking at his feet. 2 weeks later, they bought Leela, who was 10, a pony, a literal pony, because she saw one in a movie and cried. I paid my way through college on scholarships and loans. I worked through grad school. I built my career brick by brick, missing holidays to cover shifts, taking the assignments nobody else wanted because they paid overtime. Leela dabbled. She dabbled in modeling. She dabbled in fashion design. She dabbled in being an influencer. And Brenda and Gary funded every failed venture. They paid her rent. They leased her cars. They bailout her out of credit card debt 3 separate times. And 5 years ago, I made the mistake of trying to help. I had just gotten my first big promotion. I had some savings. Brenda called me, crying, saying they were behind on property taxes and risked losing the house. She swore it was a temporary cash flow issue. She swore they would pay me back within 6 months. I lent them $20,000. I wrote a check. I even typed up a simple promissory note, which they signed, laughing at my formality. "Oh, Claire, you're so corporate," Brenda had teased as she signed it. 6 months passed. No repayment, a year, nothing. When I brought it up, Brenda gasped. "How can you ask us for money right now? We just paid for Leela's trip to Bali. She needed to find herself." I never saw a dime of that money. I stopped asking, but I didn't stop remembering. I kept the promissory note. I kept the bank transfer receipt. I kept the emails where they made excuses. I filed them away in a folder on my encrypted drive labeled the black hole. Now, standing in my hallway, watching them on the security monitor, I saw Brenda for what she truly was. She wasn't a mother in distress. She was a manager looking for a new host. Brenda was a small woman, barely 5'2", but she took up all the oxygen in any room. She had chemically blonde hair that was always teased a little too high, and she wore jewelry that jangled: bangles, layered necklaces, charm bracelets. She needed you to hear her coming. She had never worked a day in her life, yet she had strong opinions on how everyone else should do their jobs. "Open this door," Brenda shrieked again, kicking the base of the door with her boot. "I know you're in there. I'm going to call the locksmith. I'm going to tell them I lost my key." "I wouldn't do that," I said through the intercom. "I'm recording this, Mom." She froze, looking at the camera. Her eyes narrowed. "You're recording your own mother." "I'm recording intruders," I said. "Intruders?" She laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "We own you, Claire. We made you. You think you're so high and mighty in your little house. You're nothing without us." Gary stepped forward, looking anxious. He was wearing his golf club casual attire, khakis, and a polo shirt, despite the chill. Gary was a retired insurance adjuster. He knew risk. He knew liability. And yet, looking at him, I realized he had cashed out his logic years ago to keep Brenda happy. "Claire," Gary said, leaning toward the camera. "Please, we have the truck coming tomorrow with the furniture. We told them to deliver it here, to your garage." My jaw dropped. "You did what?" "We routed the movers here," Gary admitted, rubbing the back of his neck. "We figured, since you have that 2-car garage and you only have 1 car. We could store the antique armoires and the dining set there, and we could put the overflow in the basement." They hadn't just planned to sleep here. They had planned to move their entire estate into my home. They had given my address to a moving company. "Cancel it," I said. "We can't," Brenda yelled. "It's too late. They're coming at 8:00 a.m. If we reject the delivery, they charge a restocking fee and storage fees. It's thousands of dollars." "Then you better find a storage unit by 8:00 a.m., I said. "Because if a truck pulls up here, I'm turning it away." "You spiteful little witch," Brenda screamed. Her face was turning red. "You are jealous, that's what this is. You're jealous because Leela is getting a fairy tale and you're alone. You want to ruin it for her." "I don't care about Leela's wedding," I said, my voice steady, though tears were pricking my eyes. "I care that you sold your house to pay for it and expect me to foot the bill for your living expenses. You're adults. Figure it out." "We have rights," Brenda yelled. "Grandparents' rights or parents' rights, filial laws, you have to take care of us." "That's not how it works," I said. "I'm not leaving," Brenda declared. She sat down on one of the suitcases right there on the porch. She crossed her arms. "I am sitting right here, all night. And when the neighbors see your elderly mother freezing on your porch, you'll be the pariah of the neighborhood. I'll make sure of it. I'll tell them you beat us." My stomach dropped. She would do it. She absolutely would lie. She would destroy my reputation in this quiet, suburban neighborhood just to get her way. She utilized social shame as a weapon. I looked at the monitor. Gary was looking at his phone, probably checking the weather. Brenda was staring death daggers at the lens. They were digging in. I needed to escalate. I couldn't just lock the door and wait. They were bringing a moving truck tomorrow. They were trying to annex my life. I walked back to my office, the room they wanted to steal, and unlocked my file cabinet. I pulled out the black hole folder. I also pulled out my laptop. If they wanted a war, they were going to get a war. But they were fighting with emotional outbursts and guilt trips. I was going to fight with documentation, leverage, and the law. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I had saved for emergencies. It wasn't the police. Not yet. It was my lawyer. My lawyer, Alan, didn't usually take calls at 9:15 p.m., but I was a high-volume client for his firm. Not personally. My personal life was boring, but I managed contracts for my company worth millions, and he was the external counsel I worked with daily. He knew I didn't panic. He knew if I was calling this late, the building was either on fire or under siege. Claire, his voice was rough like I'd woken him up. Is everything okay? Is it the Tokyo shipment? No, Alan, it's personal. I need you to tell me exactly where I stand on residential trespassing and property rights in this county, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I was in work mode now. The crying daughter was gone, the operations manager was in charge. Trespassing, who's trespassing? My parents, they're on my porch. They sold their house today, apparently to fund a wedding, and are demanding to move in. They've also directed a moving truck to my address for 8:00 a.m. tomorrow. There was a pause. I heard him sit up and the rustle of sheets. They sold their primary residence. Do they have a lease with you? Any written agreement? Did they receive mail there? No, they've never spent a night here. They just showed up 20 minutes ago. Okay, Alan said, his tone sharpening. Do not open the door. Under no circumstances do you let them cross the threshold. If they get in and stay the night, even one night, they can claim they've established residence if they have nowhere else to go. It becomes a civil matter, and you'd have to evict them. That takes months. They're threatening to camp on the porch, I said, watching the monitor. Brenda had pulled a blanket out of a suitcase and was wrapping it around herself, making a show of shivering theatrically. She says she's going to tell the neighbors I'm abusing them. Let her talk. Do you have cameras? Yes, audio and video, recording everything. Good, that's your shield. If she makes a false report, we have proof of her intent to extort housing from you. Now, about the moving truck, if it shows up, you turn it away. You tell the driver you did not authorize the delivery. They cannot unload on private property without the owner's consent. But Claire. Yeah. If they are truly desperate, they are going to escalate. People who sell their homes for a party aren't rational actors. You need leverage, real leverage. Do you have anything on their finances? Why did they really sell? They said it was for the wedding, a 6-figure party. Check it, Alan advised. That sounds excessive even for narcissists. Run a public records search on the sale, see if there were liens, see where the money actually went. If they are broke, they are dangerous. I'll draft a cease and desist regarding the moving truck and email it to you. Print it out if you can, or just have it ready to show the police. Thanks, Alan, bill me. Pro bono for this one, get them off your porch. I hung up and opened my laptop. I logged into the county clerk's land records database, a tool I used often for vetting warehouse locations. I searched for my parents' address. Sold October 14th. Price, $485,000. I did some quick math. They bought it 30 years ago for $120,000. Even after taxes and closing costs, they should have walked away with over $400,000 cash. So why were they desperate to live in my guest room? A wedding costs a lot, sure, but you don't need to be homeless to pay for it unless. I dug deeper. I looked up the liens section. There it was. A second mortgage taken out 3 years ago, and a third lien, a home equity line of credit HELOC, maxed out last year. Lienholder 1, First National Bank $200,000. Lienholder 2, Quick Cash Lending $150,000. My stomach twisted. They hadn't just sold the house for the wedding. They sold the house because they had equity stripped it to the bone. After paying off the loans, the agent fees, and the taxes, they probably walked away with less than $50,000. That wouldn't even cover the venue deposit Brenda bragged about. They were broke, completely, utterly broke, and they were lying to me and probably to Leela about how much money they had. They weren't moving in until the wedding. They were moving in forever because they had nowhere else to go and no money to get there. I felt a cold rage settle over me. They were trying to make me their retirement plan without my consent. I went to the front window. Brenda was now pacing, yelling into her phone. I assumed she was talking to Leela. I needed to break the narrative before she solidified it. I needed to talk to the golden child. I dialed Leela. She picked up on the second ring, and I could hear loud music and clinking glasses in the background. Finally, Leela's voice was slurred. Mom is freaking out. She says you locked them out in the cold. What is wrong with you, Claire? It's literally 40 degrees. Leela, listen to me, I said, cutting through her indignation. Did you know they sold the house? Yeah, obviously. It's for my day. Isn't it amazing? Mom said they got a huge payout. We're upgrading the flowers to orchids, Claire, orchids, and we're adding a raw bar. Leela, there is no payout, I said bluntly. The line went silent for a second, save for the thumping bass in the background. What? Don't be jealous. Just because they didn't sell the house for your wedding. I'm looking at the public records right now, I interrupted, my voice hard. They had 2 mortgages and a maxed-out HELOC on the house. They owed nearly $350 to the banks. After closing costs, they probably have 40 or 50 grand total. That's it. That's every penny they have in the world. That's not true, Leela stammered. Mom said they cleared $500,000. She said I have a budget of $200,000 for the reception alone. She lied, I said. They are destitute, Leela. That's why they are on my porch with suitcases. They aren't staying for a bit. They have no home. If they spend that 50 grand on your flowers and raw bar, they will be homeless. SS pensioners living in my spare room until they die. Is that what you want? You're lying, Leela shrieked. You always do this. You try to ruin everything. Put Mom on the phone. She's on the porch. Call her yourself. Ask her about the HELOC from Quick Cash Lending. Ask her specifically about the $150,000 they borrowed last year. Ask where that went. I hung up. I walked back to the security monitor. A moment later, Brenda's phone rang. She snatched it from her pocket. Leela, baby, tell your sister to open the... She stopped. Her face fell. She listened, her eyes darting around nervously. No, that's complicated financial stuff, honey. You don't need to worry about who told you that. Claire? She's lying. She's looking at old records. We have plenty, we. She paused again, listening to Leela screaming on the other end. Leela, stop. We did it for you. We spent that money on your car, on your trips, we. She pulled the phone away from her ear as if it had bitten her. Leela had hung up. Brenda stared at the phone, then turned slowly toward the camera. Her face wasn't sad. It was contorted with pure malice. She marched up to the door and hammered on it with both fists, shaking the frame. You witch, she screamed, her voice cracking. You poisoned her. You told her about the loans. That was private family business. I pressed the intercom. It's public record, Mom. I know you're broke. I know you have less than 50 grand. And I know you plan to use me as your retirement home. We are your parents, she wailed, abandoning the anger for hysteria. We gave you life, so what if we have debt? We spent it on our family, and now we have nothing. Where are we supposed to go? The street. You have $50,000, I said coldly. Go to a motel, rent an apartment, get jobs. You're 60, not 90. I can't work, Brenda spat. I have conditions, and Gary is retired. Gary can unretire. Walmart is hiring greeters, I said, but you are not coming in here. I'm not leaving, she screamed. Gary, get the crowbar from the car tools. I froze. Brenda, no, Gary mumbled, looking terrified. Get it, she commanded. It's my house, I have a right to see my daughter. If she won't open the door, we'll open it. Gary hesitated, then shuffled toward the car. That was the line. They weren't just annoying relatives anymore. They were intruders threatening forced entry. Dad, I said over the intercom, my voice low and dangerous. If you touch a tool to this door, I am calling the police. I have you on video. This is breaking and entering. Just open the door, Claire, Gary pleaded, stopping by the trunk. She's not going to stop, just let us in for one night. No. Brenda grabbed a heavy ceramic planter from my porch, a beautiful pot with a dormant hydrangea in it, and hoisted it over her head. Open it, she screamed. She threw the planter at the door. Crash. The ceramic shattered against the solid wood, shards flying everywhere. Dirt and roots exploded across the welcome mat. The noise was deafening in the quiet night. That's it, I whispered. I dialed 911. 911, what is your emergency? My parents are at my front door attempting to break in, I said clearly. They have already thrown a heavy object at the door and caused damage. They are threatening to use a crowbar. I am alone inside. I am afraid for my safety. Are they armed? No weapons seen, but my father is retrieving tools from his vehicle to force entry. Officers are dispatched. Lock yourself in an interior room if possible. I didn't hide. I stood by the monitor, my phone recording the screen as a backup. Outside, the scene was deteriorating. Brenda was kicking the shards of the pot, screaming incoherently about how ungrateful I was. Gary had returned from the car, not with a crowbar, but with a tire iron. He looked like a ghost, pale, shaking, holding the metal bar like it was a poisonous snake. Do it, Gary, break the glass panel, Brenda commanded, pointing to the decorative sidelight next to the door. Bren, I can't. Do it, she's bluffing. She won't call the cops on her own father. Gary raised the tire iron. Dad, I yelled through the intercom, loud enough to make him flinch. The police are on their way, put it down. He froze, the iron hovering in the air. He looked at the camera, then at Brenda. She called them Bren, he whimpered. She actually called them. She's lying, Brenda insisted, though her voice wavered. She's a coward. Sirens. Faint at first, then growing louder, cutting through the suburban quiet. Blue and red lights began to flicker against the trees down the street. Brenda's face went white. The reality of the situation finally pierced her delusion. She wasn't fighting a daughter she could bully, she was fighting the legal system. She grabbed Gary's arm. Get in the car, we have to go. No, Gary said, dropping TH. Tire iron. It clattered loudly on the concrete. I'm not running from the cops, Brenda. That makes it worse. 2 patrol cars pulled up to the curb, their lights blinding. Officers stepped out, hands resting near their belts. Drop the tool, one officer shouted, seeing the tire iron on the ground. Step away from the door. I watched on the screen as my parents, my mother in her faux fur, my father in his polo, were ordered to walk backwards off the porch with their hands up. It was a scene of utter humiliation. Neighbors' porch lights were flicking on up and down the street. Mrs. Gable next door was peering through her curtains. I unlocked the door and stepped out onto the porch. The cold air hit me, biting through my sweater. Ma'am, are you the homeowner? The officer asked, shining a flashlight at me. Yes, I said, I'm Claire. These people claim to be your parents, the officer said, gesturing to Brenda and Gary, who were now standing by the patrol car. Brenda was sobbing loudly, a theatrical wailing about misunderstanding. They are, I said, and they are trespassing. I asked them repeatedly to leave. They refused. My mother threw that planter at the door. I pointed to the shattered ceramic and ordered my father to use that tire iron to break the glass. It's a lie, Brenda screamed. We live here, we forgot our keys. She's having a mental breakdown. Officer, I said calmly, pulling up the video clip on my phone. Here is the footage from 5 minutes ago. You can hear her ordering him to break in. You can hear me telling them to leave. The officer watched the video. He watched Brenda throw the pot. He watched Gary raise the tire iron. He looked up at them, his expression hardening. "That's pretty clear-cut," he muttered. "I want them trespassed," I said, "and I want a report filed for the attempted break-in and the property damage." "You want to press charges?" the officer asked, raising an eyebrow. "It's your parents." I looked at Gary, who was staring at his shoes, defeated. I looked at Brenda, who was still trying to lie to the other officer, her face twisted in ugly desperation. If I didn't press charges, they would be back tomorrow. They would be back next week. They would never stop. I had to nuke the bridge. "Yes," I said, "I want to press charges." "Claire," Gary cried out, "please." "You raised the tire iron, Dad," I said softly. "You made your choice." As the officers began to handcuff them, not for arrest necessarily, but for detainment while they sorted out the scene, Brenda went nuclear. "You ungrateful brat," she shrieked as they turned her around. "After everything we did, we sold the house for this family, you're ruining Leela's wedding, you're ruining everything." "You ruined it yourself when you spent money you didn't have," I replied. Then my phone buzzed again. It was a text from Leela. "I just called the venue. Mom's check for the deposit bounced. They canceled the date." I looked at Brenda. "Leela says the check bounced, Mom. There is no wedding, it's over." Brenda stopped fighting the cuffs. She went limp, the fight finally draining out of her as the house of cards collapsed. But the night wasn't over. The officers were taking statements, but I knew the real battle would be the fallout. I had protected my house, but I had just arrested my parents. "One more thing, ma'am," the officer said, handing me a slip of paper with the case number. "If a moving truck shows up—" "I know," I said, "turn them away." "We'll have a patrol car do a drive-by in the morning," he assured me. As they put my parents into the back of the squad car to take them to the station for processing, and likely to release them on their own recognizance since the jails were full, I stood alone on my porch. The shattered pot lay at my feet. The tire iron glinted in the moonlight. I was shaking, not from cold but from adrenaline. I had won the battle, but the war for my peace was just beginning. The sun rose the next morning with a blinding, indifferent cheerfulness. I hadn't slept. I had spent the night sitting in my living room, watching the security feed of the empty porch, waiting for the retaliation. At 7:55 a.m., the rumble of a diesel engine shook the windows. I looked at the monitor. A massive white box truck was backing into my driveway, B&G Movers. I walked out the front door, coffee mug in hand, my lawyer's cease and desist letter tucked under my arm. The driver, a burly guy in a jumpsuit, hopped out with a clipboard. "Delivery for Gary and Brenda," he asked, chewing on a toothpick. "They don't live here," I said calmly. "And I am the homeowner. I did not authorize this delivery." The driver frowned, looking at his paperwork. "Says here, guest suite/garage storage, paid in full." "By whom?" "Credit card, ending in 4402. I almost laughed. That was Gary's card, the one that was maxed out. They must have squeezed the last drop of credit out of it. "To pay for this move." "The individuals who ordered this are currently detained," I said, choosing my words carefully. "They do not have access to this property. If you unload anything here, you will be trespassing, and I will have your company liable for removal costs. Here is a letter from my attorney." I handed him the paper. He scanned it, sighed, and spit out his toothpick. "Man, I hate family drama jobs," he muttered. "All right, I can't leave it here, but if I take it back, it goes to long-term storage. The fees are gonna be astronomical, and if they don't pay within 30 days, we auction it." "I understand," I said. "Do what you have to do." He climbed back into the truck. As the gears ground and the massive vehicle pulled away, I felt a weight lift off the house. They were truly gone. Their furniture, their baggage, their physical presence, it was all heading to a warehouse in New Jersey. But the emotional climax happened 2 hours later. My phone blew up, Not with calls, but with notifications. Leela had posted a video. I opened Instagram. There was Leela, tear-streaked face, no makeup, sitting in her studio apartment. "So, update," she choked out. "There's no wedding. The venue canceled because the check bounced. My parents, they lied. They don't have money. They have nothing." She took a deep breath, and for the first time in her life, she looked real. She looked tired. "And last night," she continued, "they tried to break into my sister Claire's house because they had nowhere to go. She had to call the police. At first, I was mad at her. But then she sent me the proof. The bank records, the lies. They were going to let me plan a wedding they couldn't pay for, just to keep up appearances, and then mooch off Claire forever." She looked directly into the camera. "I'm sorry, Chad. I'm sorry to everyone we invited. We're returning the gifts. And Mom, Dad, don't come here, don't call me. I need to figure out my own life for once." The video ended. It was the public humiliation Brenda had feared, but she had brought it on herself. The society debut she wanted had turned into a viral confession of bankruptcy and fraud. Half an hour later, a taxi pulled up to my curb. I watched on the monitor. It was Brenda and Gary. They had been released. They looked haggard. Brenda's hair was flat, her makeup smeared. Gary looked 10 years older. They didn't come to the door. They stood on the sidewalk, looking at the house. Looking at the tire iron mark on the doorframe. Looking at the empty driveway where the moving truck should have been. Brenda pulled out her phone. She called me. I answered, but I didn't open the door. "The truck is gone," she whispered. Her voice was hollow. "I sent it away," I said. "It's going to storage." "We have nowhere, Claire. We have nothing." "You have the car," I said, "and you have $50,000 minus whatever bail cost you. Go." "We're your parents," she wept, but it was weak. It wasn't a demand anymore. It was a plea from a defeated woman. "I know," I said, "and that's why this is so hard. But you broke the contract, Mom. You tried to break my door. You tried to break my life. Go." Gary put a hand on her shoulder. He looked at the house one last time, a look of profound regret, and guided her back to the taxi. They got in. The car drove away. I stood in the hallway and finally, for the first time in 24 hours, I cried. Not out of guilt, but out of relief. The siege was over. It's been 6 months since that night. The fallout was messy, as these things always are. Brenda and Gary ended up in a cheap motel for a few weeks before moving into a small, rental apartment 2 towns over. It's a far cry from the Colonial, but it's a roof. Gary got a job at a hardware store. He actually seems to like it. He talks to people, he feels useful, and for the first time in decades, he's not just Brenda's shadow. Brenda is adjusting. She had to sell most of her jewelry to cover the moving storage fees. She's not happy, but she's quiet. Her social standing evaporated the moment the truth about their finances came out, so she stays inside mostly. Leela surprised me the most. She broke up with the DJ. She got a job as a receptionist at a dental office. It's not glamorous, and she hates the uniform, but she's paying her own rent. We meet for coffee once a week. We're not best friends, we have too much history for that, but we're building something new, something based on truth, not transaction. "I always thought you were the mean one," Leela told me last week, stirring her latte. "But you were just the only one who lived in the real world." "The real world sucks sometimes," I smiled. "Yeah," she laughed, "but at least the checks don't bounce." As for me, I'm still in my house. I replaced the front door with a solid mahogany one. It's stronger, better reinforced. I still have the security system, but I don't check it obsessively anymore. My home is peaceful again. The silence is back, but it's not heavy. It's light. It's the sound of a space that is entirely, unapologetically mine. I didn't lend them money. I didn't let them move in. And because of that, I saved myself. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is set a boundary so high that nobody can climb over it, not even the people who raised you.